Hi, everybody. Welcome to the third long overdue episode of the Crazy Sacred video podcast. I figured right now would probably be a really good time to post because, as I mentioned earlier today on Facebook, I'm having a tough day. It's one of those mental health catastrophe days where I woke up and it's just like, oh, nothing is going right. Everything seems really bad. It's like, oh, can I just lay down and die? Not terribly literally, but not too far off. I'm like, oh, I just want to get away from everything. I feel like maybe what I want to talk about today is a good thing to talk about considering I'm in this mindset, so that you'll know that what I'm going to say isn't just a bunch of fluff and rainbows and idealistic kind of nonsense, but I can say that I really think this is truth even on the days when things are not idealistic at all and I'm not doing so hot. So what I want to talk about today kind of follows what I talked about last time about why I think going to counseling can be of tremendous benefit. And what I want to talk about is some of the best advice that I've ever received. And it was actually from somebody I've adopted as a spiritual teacher. I've never met him, jealous of everybody who has. It's Richard Rohr. He's a Franciscan priest and runs a Center for Action and Contemplation down in Albuquerque. Really great guy. Anyway, he has this line that he drops occasionally, and I think it's brilliant. And when I first thought about it, I'm like, oh, it's kind of painful. I don't want to think too far into this. But the more I've thought about it, the more I think it's so spot on. And what he says is, you can't hate your mother and still grow spiritually or grow in general. So what does that mean? You can't hate your mother. Well, there's a couple different levels to this. He means you literally can't hate your biological mother, but he also means you can't hate where you come from, like your tradition, your background. So on a very basic level, I think for most people, there's probably at least some small time in your life where you thought your parents were possibly nutso, like literally, like maybe not too smart, maybe out of their minds, maybe one or both of them. Or besides just maybe not being on the same page as you, one of your parents might have really screwed you over when you were little or done something that really hurt you. So maybe now you're at a point in your life where you look back on your parents and you don't have the fondest of memories, and maybe you feel some kind of hate or malice towards them. So his advice applies to this, and I'll talk more about this later, is that you can't literally hate your mother and grow. But then for others of us too, maybe we grew up in a tradition, like a spiritual tradition, religious tradition, maybe just a certain kind of community that looked at the world a certain way. And maybe now you're older and you've seen a little bit more of the world, and you somehow start hating where you come from. Maybe you look back on where you were and you really hate the tradition that you grew up in, and you don't want any part of that. I think that happens a lot of people. I mean, obviously, in this day and time, there are thousands of members of the Church Alumni Association who really don't want to have anything to do with traditional Christianity anymore. And I'm sure this goes across the board. I'm sure there's plenty of Islam alumni out there too who don't want to have anything to do with traditional popular Islam, and all their other religious variations out there I think are the same. And Richard Rohr is talking about this kind of thing too, is that if you want to grow spiritually, if you want to get to a place of wholeness, you just can't hate your mother. You can't hate the tradition that you come from. And this may seem kind of like a silly thing, like why not? Why is not liking where you come from going to hold you back? And wait a second, Julie, a lot of these traditions that we came from, or families that we came from, like I said, they really screwed us over, and we are completely justified in hating them and wanting nothing to do with them. And I should just clarify before I say anything else, I am not saying that you should in any way push under the rug wrongs that were done to you, that you should not ignore grave social injustices or bigotry or any other societal wrongs done by groups that you were a part of, or anything like that. I'm totally not saying that you should ignore any of that. It should totally be recognized and dealt with. However, you can't hate it and be able to move on. So in the last post, I talked about what a tremendous benefit counseling can pose. And I think that everybody, regardless of whether or not you've had diagnosed mental health, you should just go get some counseling, because we all have our hang-ups. We all have our blind spots that we can't see. There's areas of our lives that we haven't dealt with or looked into very well, and they're keeping us from progressing where we want to be. So the psychologist Carl Jung and others have talked about this idea of shadow work, and how to really grow, we all need to delve into our shadows, to get into those secrets in the areas where we might be a little bit myopic, and struggle with them and deal with them and not just ignore them. And I think Richard Rohr would definitely say we have to do this shadow work too. And although the shadow work is painful, it's by embracing this pain, accepting what is, and not necessarily always judging it as good or bad, but just being in the moment and accepting it, and accepting things that have happened to you, and learning not to hate it. These are the things that are really going to help you move forward in your life. So the first thing to really look at is whether or not your literal parents, or whether or not your religious tradition, societal tradition you grew up in is good or bad. They're what made you. That was the environment that formed you to become the person that you are right now. So in some form or fashion, you have to recognize the fact that you wouldn't be where you are right now if it hadn't been for things that happened in the past. Now, you could be looking at this very pessimistically and saying, yes, Julie, I am super not thrilled where I am right now, so no thanks to the people and places where I came from. I'm not going to pay them any lip service. And I totally get that. However, I don't think that for any individual, I haven't met people where I could say that every single aspect of their life is completely broken and not good. I think everybody has good things that have come with them from their past. Sometimes it may be really hard to see, maybe it is really hard to dig up, but I'm not willing to just throw out the baby with the bathwater and say that everybody got to where they are without some kind of good coming along with the bad from the past. And an important thing about this is, you know, if you look back on your past in whatever form or fashion it is, family, religious tradition or whatever, and you're not at peace with it, that is the telltale sign that you still have a lot of spiritual growing to do. And honestly, when I first realized this, I didn't like it, because I think I was reading Richard Rohr talking about this and listening to him speak about it right when I thought, I'm doing pretty good spiritually. I like where I'm at. It's like there's certain stuff from my past traditions I don't want to have anything to do with, and I'm fine. And the more I thought about what he said, the more I started realizing I was actually repulsed in a really negative way by some of my past, in a very judgmental and condescending way. And I was basically hating part of my tradition and part of things that came along with my family. And so when I thought that I was just chugging along nicely and in this great spiritual place, I really wasn't. I was really fooling myself because I wasn't at peace. So just to give a little bit of background story, and I don't want to go into too many details, just to show that I think I've had a little bit of personal experience to say that what I'm trying to tell you about how you can't hate your mother, I really think this is true. So I had a couple experiences when I was young where a couple people in particular hurt me really, really badly. And it wasn't just me kind of ratcheting up in my mind what they did and just over-exaggerating it. They'd really hurt me, and it had some lasting consequences for decades, and really had a huge impact on how my life turned out. When I first started going to counseling, as I talked about before, it was totally for pain management. I was carrying along all this baggage of pain. I had a lot of suppressed stuff that I didn't even want to look at. And then over time, the more work I was doing in counseling, the more of my suppressed emotions started coming up, and the angrier and angrier I started feeling towards these particular people, and the more justified I felt in being angry, and for several years, I couldn't even think about these particular people without just being like enraged and just completely bitter and resentful towards them. And that felt like a really bad place to be. I felt really stuck, and I was thinking, am I really going to go through the rest of my life being angry at these people? It doesn't feel good, but I don't see how there's any way past this. However, the more and more I work through these things, the more and more I let time heal things, and the more that I learned to try to do what I was telling you about last time, about accepting the pain and not judging everything as good or bad, and trying to understand where these particular people were in their own lives, like trying to understand how they got to be where they were and trying to walk in their shoes for a while. The more I did this work, as painful as it was, I was finally able to reach a point where I didn't hate them anymore. And it's the funniest thing now, because there's one person in particular that I felt just really did a lot of damage to me. And the funny thing is, now, after doing all this work and learning to accept the pain and deal with it and move on and trying to understand this person, that damage that they caused me is almost like a non-issue anymore. Like, I remember that it happened. I'm not in any way saying it was okay for what happened to have happened, but it's just a non-issue. And these things don't create a barrier in the relationship that I have with this person anymore. And that was something that I never, ever thought would happen. And I also noticed that once I got through some of this pain with them and learned that, I could love this person and be in a relationship with this person without hating them, I started noticing a lot of growth in my life and a lot more peace. And again, I should reiterate, like, there's definitely boundaries here. If somebody hurts you and continues to hurt you and has not changed, I am not in any way saying that you should just all of a sudden feel lovey-dovey towards them and just, go jump back into a close relationship with them. No, definitely boundaries. And some people, they're going to constantly be damaging to you, and some people you just can't be in a relationship with, and that's perfectly acceptable. However, I totally believe that you can still be in a place where you're not feeling hate towards them. You're not feeling malice towards them. You're only feeling well wishes and well-being towards them. It takes a while to get there, but it's totally possible. So another thing that I'm encountering of late, and this is something that I'm still struggling with, but I think it's totally possible to get through, is the whole idea of, and this is what Richard Rohr was really getting at, is that you can't hate the tradition that you grew up in. And like I said, so many Christians and other people in different religious groups, you grow up and you adopt a religious tradition or faith tradition because that's what your parents gave you, and that was what makes sense. That's all you know. And then later you start exploring different parts of the world and different things, and you're like, wait a second, those explanations they gave me do not fit my world paradigm at all anymore. They do not answer any questions. It's no longer relevant. And you may almost start feeling like you're despising where you came from. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with that anymore. And I've definitely, honestly, felt that way. I mean, I grew up in a fairly conservative tradition and way of looking at the world, and I've grown way past that, I guess. I'm not saying that I've grown in, like, I'm a better person than the people in the faith tradition I grew up in were. I'm not saying that at all. It's just a lot of the answers that I was given about things and the way the world worked when I was little, they just don't work for me at all anymore. And it almost feels ludicrous for me to even go back and try to pretend like I believe them. And I noticed when I was starting to move away from a lot of what I grew up with in the faith tradition that had served me well for so long, I noticed I was starting to hate it and be resentful and bitter. And it seemed like all the things that had always annoyed me a little bit all of a sudden seemed to be these huge things. And it was just like I wanted to be condescending and judgmental towards these things and be like, oh, that's the nuttiest thing. How could people believe that? That's just ridiculous, et cetera, et cetera. And the more I listened to Richard Rohr talk about these kind of things, the more I realized, me taking this attitude towards where I came from is not helpful at all. And the fact is, I would not be where I am spiritually right now or in my understanding of the world had I not grown up in that faith tradition. And the fact is, I owe it a lot I owe the people a lot who sacrificed so much for me, who spent so much time talking to me and working with me. They definitely got me to where I am. So all this to say now is, whether or not I agree with them and agree with what I was taught when I was growing up, and even till, not that long ago, while I may not agree with it, I can be thankful and grateful for it. And I don't have to sit here and judge it necessarily as good or bad, which is a tendency that we all have to do. Especially in America, like, we want to, if something's presented to us, we want to be able to judge it immediately. It's good or bad, right or wrong, black or white. And that's just not a good way to live, because sometimes there's just too many paradoxes in life. None of us have the big picture. It's better to just learn to hold things into tension and say, well, I don't know the whole big picture here. I may not agree with this, but I can value them and validate them and be grateful for the good things that they did give me in my life. And I remember being struck for a while, like, by some religious teachers. So, like, I definitely have an affinity for Eastern philosophy. It does a whole lot for me. That it answers a lot of questions that sometimes Western religion really couldn't help me with at all. And I'm one of those people, like, I do these huge pendulum swings. So if I get excited about some new idea, I'm just like, whoo, let's go way over to the side. And then sometimes I come way back to the other side. It usually takes me a few swings before I kind of settle into the middle. And for quite a while there, even though I wouldn't, like, literally think in my mind, I'm like, hey, maybe I should just go become Buddhist, because, man, they're really helping me out right now. And I went and heard the Dalai Lama speak, which, by the way, I just think he's amazing. And he reiterated something that Richard Rohr was saying. He didn't say it in so many words, but he was basically saying, you can't hate your tradition. And he's like, just because, somebody else's practices may be helping you, that doesn't mean you need to just go ditch where you came from and just give up any sense of gratefulness towards them and just constantly see it as wrong. The Dalai Lama would also say, you don't need to become a Buddhist just because we may say something that can help you or have some practices. He's like, you need to go back to your tradition, because that tradition is what grew you up and what made you what you are. Yes, you may not agree with certain things that they say. You may not agree with practices, but you need to go back and find a place in that tradition where you can work and incorporate things from the outside, from other traditions. And it's kind of funny, once I heard Richard Rohr talk about this, not hating your mother, I heard the Dalai Lama say it, and then I heard so many other people from various religious traditions say this. Like, you don't have to just pick up and leave where you came from. So all these great spiritual sages really helped me come to a better place of comfort, of knowing, like, yes, I can stay where I am. Like, I don't have to hate my mother to still be able to grow. And in fact, if I want to grow spiritually and become more embracing of things outside of the tradition I grew up in, then I've got to stop being judgmental of that particular tradition. So I hope this didn't seem like I was rambling too much, and I hope it wasn't too nebulous. But maybe it's something for you to think about is, if you're looking back on something in your life that you keep getting stuck in, maybe it's a wall you keep running up against because you're just angry about something, or you just feel fed up with something that that you used to be a part of, or with some aspect of your life that that used to be a major part of your life. I would just encourage you to keep thinking about the fact that you need to work through that. That it is possible to get past the anger, but just being in a place of constant anger isn't going to help you out at all. And you need to keep working, keep examining yourself, keep trying to understand the perspectives and paradigms of everybody in those situations so that you can learn to not hate them. And once you can do that, and once you can hold all this kind of stuff in attention, which seems kind of paradoxical, sometimes it doesn't seem like it's possible, but it really is. Once you're able to get to a point where you can hold it all in attention and accept what is and be grateful for the good and cognizant that bad things did happen, yet not letting them control you, that's where you're really going to start seeing spiritual growth. So all that said, I am still definitely learning about this. I'm not an expert in this at all, but all of it really rings true with me, and I've definitely seen some huge steps in my own life with this. So I encourage you to at least think about it. And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this, or if you want to tell me that I'm flat out wacky, you're more than welcome to do so. But anyway, if you want to leave a comment on my blog or my Facebook page, that would be great, and I'd love to hear from you. So I hope you have a great day. Thanks.